Hi, everybody. Thomas Miller from the Fun Astrology video podcast. We're taking a look at the week of December 9th, and fortunately, it's going to be a pretty short report this time because the big action was last week. Obviously, Mars went into retrograde on Friday. Neptune came out on the weekend, and boy, what a week it was. So before we go forward, let's just take a look at the week past in review. We had a healthcare CEO assassinated on the streets of Manhattan. We had a federal judge basically move the social media platform TikTok toward being banned in January. We had 3 governments, France, South Korea, and Syria, with major challenges to their governmental structures. President Putin of Russia warned President-elect Donald Trump of the United States that he is not safe. And one day last week, Cuba woke up to a failure in their electrical grid. All of that in 1 week. Well, like I said, fortunately, the energy of this week won't be anything like last week. We had the Sun square Saturn. I mean, it was just astrological symbols all over the place for challenge and conflict, and boy, did we have it. But this week, one of the big features of the week is going to be the moon. So the moon is right here, and it's in Aries as we begin the week. But through the week, and I want to show you the chart so you can just get it in your mind, we're going to be following the moon all the way through Gemini this week. Here's the rundown. All of these times are Eastern. Monday morning, 8:37, the moon enters Aries. That goes all the way through until Wednesday at 10:55 a.m. when it enters Taurus. Now, one of the things to note about this Aries moon is that on Tuesday at 5:13 Eastern, it trines the sun in Capricorn, and that's a very positive aspect, but then it goes void of course for 17, almost 18 hours, because it doesn't enter Taurus until 10:55, let's say, on Wednesday morning. Then we get Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday morning with the moon in Taurus, that nice grounded energy that we're going to really need next week to kind of process and digest last week. And then at 12:21 on Friday, the moon enters Gemini. Now, the aspect that the moon makes on Friday, just before it goes into Gemini, is a sextile to Neptune. Then it has a 4 and 42-minute void of course, and that's another positive aspect. So we have 2 lunar aspects carrying us all through the work week that we get a favorable moon. Then the moon enters Gemini on Friday. We have that moon all the way until Sunday. And that last aspect before the moon enters Cancer is a square to Neptune. So the weekend is a little bit more tense from a lunar position. The week itself is very good. So this is where I'm thinking that through these times, I mean, there's going to be so much. Like last week was just a warm, and then Mars hadn't even gone into retrograde yet, and look at what all happened. So we know that there are a lot of hurdles and a lot of astrological and just societal dominoes that we have to jump over between now and the spring of next year. It's going to be a lot, and then when we kick into the spring, that actually fires off more of these planetary sign changes. So as we're going through all of this, I'm just thinking, okay, if we can think for a couple of days, I've got Monday and Tuesday Aries, I'm going to get stuff done. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning, Taurus, I can be grounded. Maybe I don't get quite as rattled. Maybe things around the world calms down, and the news cycle is slower this week. We can pray. And then we get into Gemini. Okay, multiple things at once. We can fire off quite a few things Friday and Saturday, but realizing that that void of course is going to be more challenging. Now, what am I talking about with this void of course moon thing and all of that? Let me show you real quick. This is a technique that a lot of astrologers deploy. I picked it up with Steve Forrest when I narrated the Book of the Moon for him, and it's the whole chapter 4 is on this technique. So if you're interested in this and are not as familiar with it, the full description is in that book, The Book of the Moon by Stephen Forrest. You can pick up the audiobook. The nice thing about the way that Steve writes is you don't have to have a chart in front of you. He explains it all verbally in his wonderful prose. If you've never read a Steve Forrest book, you owe yourself to it. Don't die without reading a Steve Forrest book, or preferably listening to me narrate one. But here's what happens. So what we're looking at here is the moon has just entered Aries. That's 0 degrees. All right? Before that, it was coming through Pisces. The last thing it did, and you can just see it right here on the chart. In fact, let me erase this. So the last thing that the moon did as it was coming through Pisces, you can see it right here, is it conjoined Neptune. And you could see that that was a positive aspect. And then the moon entered Aries, where it is now. So that time between when it conjoined Neptune and it entered Aries, that time right there is called void of course, because there is no other aspect on the chart that the moon makes during that time. So then the moon moves through Aries and on its way to Taurus, and the last thing it does before it enters Taurus is it hits the sun with a favorable trine aspect. So it'll be like kind of like that with the moon right here. And that's the last aspect before it enters Taurus. Now, the technique is that the last aspect that it makes, if it's a positive sextile, trine, or favorable conjunction, then it makes that whole period favorable for that lunar transit. So because we have a trine to the sun, this whole time that the moon is in Aries is considered positive. And the same thing happens as the moon goes through Taurus into Gemini on Friday. And that last aspect on Friday then will be a sextile to Neptune. So it will look about like that. Now, this is an interesting point because, look, the moon will have to conjoin Uranus on its way through here, right? It's going to cross right over it. But notice, Uranus is at 24 degrees, Neptune is at 27 degrees. And these are Ptolemaic aspects. So we're talking about signs, sextiles, conjunctions, oppositions. We don't go into the sub-aspects because you could say, well, wait a minute, what about, some of these other points? Well, there's nothing there. I mean, look, everything now is scrunched down. Like when we moved Pluto into Aquarius, now we really only have these two. What else do we have? Yeah, those two are going to be the exit door aspects that the moon is going to be making, will be those two most of the time. Now, not always. There will be some variations with that. But the idea here is that when the moon makes that last aspect, that if it's a trine or a sextile or a conjunction before leaving that sign, then everything that is done during that period that it's in the previous sign, like Aries now, is favorable. Favorable, blessed by the moon, if you will. And the reason that we follow the void of course, the way Steve explains it in chapter 4, is that the moon needs the cooperation or the influence or the connection with another planet for it to do what it does. And the moon has a lot to do, obviously, with making things happen. It makes the tide go in, it makes the tide flow out. So the lunar activity, if you think about things flowing into our lives and things flowing out of our lives, things that we want to bring in, things that we want to move out, the moon has a tremendous influence on that, and we don't use it enough, truly. I mean, if you follow this week, and maybe this is the thing to do for this week, is to just follow this lunar activity right there, because all the other aspects this week are relatively insignificant. So you can just follow this and experience that flow for this week. And we have a resource that can help you with this tremendously. If you go to the website, funastrology.com/moon, my partner, Kristin Lawhead, has put together a wonderful calendar, and then she went in and decorated it even more. It's in Christmas colors now, but we will be leaving it that way because the green days mean a favorable aspect before the moon leaves a sign, and the red days, obviously, a challenging one. So you can get that free. You can look at it anytime you want, and then if you just right-click it, you can download it to your computer or your laptop, or I'm not sure how you do it on the phone, but just however you download stuff from a page, you can do it. And that is always updated for us, and we are going to be following it a lot, especially in the audio podcast. Now, there is one other aspect that we certainly should look at here, and that is this, what's called a mystic rectangle. Your eyes probably fell to it and you thought, oh, we've talked about that on here before, have we not? Yes, absolutely. And it's a very powerful positive aspect. And as we check out the corners of this said mystic rectangle, we have Pluto. And Pluto, now Venus actually conjoined Pluto this past week. And that's a favorable, very favorable position for Venus, the moon, and then Mars, dome, ta-dome, dome, and then the south node of the moon, which is basically dealing with our old karma. So when you look at this, I mean, you just look at that right now. Wow, you've got a big conflict set up here. That Mars across from Pluto is a big challenge. So where could things show up in your life? Well, it could certainly be around relationships, or it could be around the independence of Aquarius, the thou shalt not tell me what to do dynamic of Aquarius being challenged by some external force, be it a person, relationship, Venus, or something else. Maybe it even becomes an emotional experience and an emotionally charged experience because this Mars is a firecracker right now. So the big thing is to have your spiritual antenna up this week and be alert for these subtleties that could be opportunities for you to grow, and don't get reactive to them. That's the big key. Don't react, like count to 50, 500, whatever you have to do to stay grounded. Delay responding to things and just stay in a solid square space of stability. You've got the Taurus moon for 3 of the 5 days this week to do that with. Now, the last thing I wanted to show you here is just the grid view. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I like to check in with this because we have that big mystic rectangle, and that is favorable to start the week. Now, that's a Monday thing because the moon was involved, but it's a great way to start the week. Good energy there. But if your software, if you have access to software with this grid view in it, this is Astro Gold that I'm using, then you can come in here and just from below this line, these are the parallels and contraparallels. Don't worry about that. Below this line is where the action is, and I'm counting everything above here. So that's the ascendant. Let me just mark that real quick. Everything above right there is what I'm counting in this score of the blues are positive, and then the reds and then a couple of other things that I have in there in the chart are considered challenges. And what I get is a score of 19 positive to 12 challenging. So at least for Monday, starting the week off, again, we have this template of a little bit more positive favor tilt to the sky right now. So that's why I think one of the big things we can do this week is to not react, don't respond quickly, let things soak, let it be, and just let this energy kind of pass over us. Get your stuff done. It's a good week to just put your head down and get your own stuff done. Be productive. Don't connect to the noise around us. And hopefully that follows through to the mundane and we don't have a bunch of crazy stuff happen like we did last week. It sure would be great if that was the case. We'll be on the audio podcast this week. I am going to be throttling back and taking a little bit of time off through the rest of the month just to kind of get my own grounding back. But Liz Grace Christie is going to join us on Tuesday, and then I'm sure that we'll have somebody else on Thursday to fill in. So you'll have the audio podcasts to track along with this, and then I will see you back here next weekend. I am going to keep the videos going because that's what I'm moving toward and need a little bit of time to develop. So there may be even more shorts and TikToks and things like that as the week unfolds. Thanks so much for watching. I wish you a great week. I love you, and I will see you back next week.